My name is Monica Smith, and at 42, I thought I knew what heartbreak meant. On that fateful afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows, my world came crashing down with a single phone call from my husband's aunt. Her voice, usually warm and comforting like a grandmother's quilt, trembled as she delivered the devastating news. My parents-in-law, the pillars of strength in our family, had been tragically taken from us in a horrific car accident. As if fate hadn't dealt me a cruel enough hand, my husband Jeffrey was supposedly away on a 2-week business trip overseas. My trembling fingers dialed his number again and again, each unanswered ring like a dagger to my already wounded heart. The sterile hospital corridors seemed endless as I rushed through them, my heels clicking against the cold floor like a ticking clock counting down to disaster. There they were, the entire family waiting, their faces painted with grief and concern. "Monica, we've been waiting," they said, their eyes searching behind me. "Isn't Jeffrey with you?" "He's away on business," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm trying to reach him. I'll try again." When Jeffrey finally answered, my heart leaped with desperate relief. "Jeffrey, thank God you've answered," I breathed into the phone. But his response cut through my relief like an icy wind. "I told you not to call. I'm in an important meeting," he snapped, his voice hard and unfamiliar. I tried to explain the emergency, but his words were as final as a judge's gavel. "Nothing is more important than this meeting. Don't call again." The line went dead, leaving me standing there, clutching my phone like a lifeline in a storm. A family member gently suggested, "Why don't we try calling his office tomorrow? He might respond to them." The suggestion seemed like a beacon of hope in my darkness. The next morning, through my fog of confusion, I reached his company. "This is Monica Smith, Jeffrey's wife," I explained, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "His parents have been in a fatal accident, and I need to reach him during his business trip." The response that came back froze the very blood in my veins. "Business trip? Your husband is on extended personal leave." "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I asked, my world tilting on its axis. "There are no international business trips scheduled for your husband," they confirmed, each word another crack in my reality. I stood there, stunned into silence, as the pieces of my life began to crumble around me. Personal leave? My mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. If he wasn't on a business trip, where was he? The crushing weight of betrayal pressed against my chest as confusion turned to anger. How could I face the others when we hadn't even arranged the funeral? As tension mounted and time for contacting the funeral home grew short, Jeffrey's cousin Derek broke the suffocating silence. "Jeffrey is in England right now," he said, his words falling like lead in the quiet room. "England? What's he doing there? How do you know?" I demanded, my voice rising with each question. Derek hesitated, like a man carrying a burden too heavy to bear. He asked me not to tell anyone. "He's there with a work colleague." A premonition of doom, dark as storm clouds, swept over me. "Is he with Natalie?" I asked, my sister's name tasting like poison on my tongue. Derek's hesitation confirmed my worst fears before he could even speak. While we were informing relatives about my parents-in-law's deaths, my sister Natalie had been mysteriously unreachable. When I asked my parents about Natalie, they casually mentioned she was on vacation with her children, and suddenly, all the pieces of this cruel puzzle fell into place. Under my relentless questioning, Derek finally revealed the devastating truth. Jeffrey and Natalie had been carrying on their affair for 3 or 4 years, and now they were vacationing together like star-crossed lovers. The betrayal cut through me like a blade of ice, shattering everything I thought I knew about my life. I never imagined such deception could be happening right under my nose, while I played the role of the devoted wife and loving sister. As the family gathered around me offering comfort, tears streamed down my face like bitter rain, each drop carrying the weight of their double betrayal. Since the heir neglects his duty, they declared with steely determination, let's honor the deceased with a magnificent funeral. We won't let that unfortunate man inherit anything. And so, like a queen planning her ultimate move in a game of chess, I decided to execute my plan for Jeffrey's punishment. 2 weeks later, Jeffrey waltzed through our front door as if returning from a delightful vacation, his demeanor casual and relaxed. I'm home, he announced with infuriating nonchalance. The jet lag is really something. Indeed, I thought silently, then wordlessly handed him the divorce papers like a judge delivering a verdict. I have something prepared for you, I said, my voice steady as steel. What's this? Jeffrey asked, his face registering shock. After a moment of heavy silence, I replied with the strength of a woman who had found her power, divorce papers. His expression transformed instantly from casual to confused, like a mask slipping off to reveal the truth beneath. Divorce? Why so suddenly? He stammered, feigning innocence like a poor actor on stage. After your recent trip, do you really think I don't know what you've been doing? About you and Natalie? I continued, my words sharp as arrows. He gave a nervous laugh, but I wasn't about to let him slither away like the snake he was. Don't deny it. I know everything you've done. Wait, did Natalie tell you, or was it Derek? He mumbled, searching for excuses like a drowning man grasping at straws. How I found out doesn't matter. What matters is you had the audacity to have an affair with my own sister, I declared with the finality of a judge's gavel. Jeffrey tried to downplay it like a child caught in a lie. It's not a big deal, it only happened a few times. I lost control, but I realized my mistake and ended it. I swear, Monica, you and William mean everything to me. It was a mistake in the past, can't you forgive me? He used our 10-year-old son William as a shield, but his pleas bounced off my hardened heart like rain off a window. Do you really think you can call this just a mistake and pretend nothing happened? Do you think I'm a fool? I fired back, my voice trembling with rage. So you were with Natalie in England, and you lied about it being a business trip? How dare you? I shouted, unleashing years of pent-up anger. Jeffrey fell silent, but I pressed on like a prosecutor building her case. How long has this been going on? A year? Not a year, it was just once, he lied, but I cut him off like a sword through silk. I know perfectly well this has been going on for 4 or 5 years. Jeffrey crumbled like a house of cards, his facade finally falling away. Damn it, Derek should have kept his mouth shut. Stop blaming others, this is all your responsibility. The most infuriating part is how you talk about Natalie's daughter like a niece, when she's actually much more than that, isn't she? He paused for a moment, then spoke in the defeated tone of a man whose secrets had finally caught up with him. Yes, you're right. I didn't want to tell you like this, but that child is mine. What are you saying? Not only did you have an affair, but you had a child with her, and you still dare to say you love me? Your audacity is unbelievable. I responded, my voice a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Not only Jeffrey but my own sister Natalie, both people I trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. She showed not an ounce of remorse as their relationship continued behind my back for years. I had foolishly attributed their closeness to being colleagues and family, but I couldn't have been more wrong. My family and I had been completely deceived, played like puppets in their twisted game. What we felt wasn't just anger, it was a deep, visceral revulsion at their actions, like a poison spreading through our souls. Both you and Natalie will face the consequences of your actions, I said with ice in my voice. But that's a matter for later, there's something more important right now. More important? What could be more important? He asked, bewildered, as I called for his aunt waiting in the next room. Well, Jeffrey, how nice to see you. How was your trip to England? his aunt asked with a smile as sharp as a razor's edge. Jeffrey looked around like a cornered animal, taking in the gathered family members with growing unease. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" he demanded, his voice trembling slightly. "It's very serious, Jeffrey," his aunt replied with the gravity of a funeral bell. "While you were away, your parents died in a car accident." "What? When did this happen?" he asked, his face draining of color. "Right after you left," I answered, my voice steady as a judge's. "I tried to reach you multiple times, but you wouldn't answer my calls." Jeffrey, looking shell-shocked, stammered, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "I did try to tell you, but you kept hanging up on me. Then when I called your company, I learned you weren't on a business trip at all. And that's how I discovered your affair with Natalie," I explained with cruel precision. "You had no right to call my company," he protested weakly. "Rights? You're talking about rights after refusing to answer your phone during such a crucial time? How dare you?" I shot back, my words sharp as icicles. "Is the funeral already over?" Jeffrey asked, his voice small and lost. "Yes, it's done. It was a grand service. Everyone noticed the absence of their only son," I informed him, twisting the knife. Overwhelmed with shame, Jeffrey attempted an apology. "I'm sorry. I'll take responsibility for everything now." The family immediately pounced like wolves on wounded prey. "Of course you will, Jeffrey. You should be grateful to Monica for handling everything as your wife, even knowing what you'd done," they reminded him without mercy. And so, with the divorce papers delivered, our marriage came to its bitter end. The situation was overwhelming. Truthfully, I hadn't even had time to properly mourn my parents-in-law. My heart was barely holding together, and without the support of Jeffrey's aunt and other relatives, I might have completely shattered. I expressed my deepest gratitude to them all. "I couldn't have done this without all of you. Thank you so much." In the end, despite everything, the funeral was truly beautiful. "Raymond and Teresa must be smiling down from heaven," someone commented softly. "How many people attended the service?" Jeffrey asked, still struggling to comprehend what had happened. His aunt smiled sweetly, like honey laced with poison. "Well, it was less of a funeral and more of a celebration of life for your father, the renowned jazz musician he was." "What do you mean? Like a party?" Jeffrey asked, his confusion evident. "Oh yes, it was a wonderful celebration. And as the heir, you should know you covered all the expenses," his aunt added with a wickedly satisfying smile. Jeffrey's face was a masterpiece of emotions, confusion and distress painting every feature. Laughing softly, I began to explain the details of the service. "Since your parents were such a devoted couple, we held a joint service for both of them. Your father Raymond was a nationally acclaimed jazz musician, and Teresa was a senior flight attendant instructor. They had quite the social circle. Over 400 people came to pay their respects. Since so many people came to bid them farewell, we decided to give thank you gifts to everyone. Though I'm afraid this will significantly reduce your inheritance," I explained with calculated sweetness. "This might sound disrespectful, but your parents actually had no intention of leaving you an inheritance anyway. But we'll get to that later," I added with a knowing smile. "I'm sure they're both laughing in heaven right now," I said, my voice dripping with irony. "Thank you gifts?" Jeffrey asked, worry creeping into his voice like a shadow. "Yes, we gave a special gift to each person who came to pay their respects," a relative explained with barely concealed satisfaction. "How much did that cost?" Jeffrey asked, bracing himself for the worst. "Luxury gift boxes with gourmet cakes. $30 each," I replied casually. "Only $30? Jeffrey asked, relief washing over his face like a fool's comfort. "Yes, but I ordered 500 boxes," I replied calmly. 500 boxes at $30 each, Jeffrey calculated quickly, his face paling. That's $15,000. That's right. But there's so much more, I added with a smile as sweet as poisoned honey. What happened to the leftover boxes? Jeffrey asked desperately, trying to minimize the damage. Oh, we had about 50 boxes left, so we all enjoyed them. They were absolutely delicious, someone commented with a bright smile. You spend over $5,000 on cakes and just ate them? This is insane. Jeffrey exploded, losing his composure. Well, we couldn't exactly consult you, could we? You wouldn't answer your phone. Besides, we couldn't let your parents' reputation suffer even in death, I reminded him with maddening calmness. What's the total cost? He asked, defeat heavy in his voice. Let's see, the service was about $20,000, and with the thank you gifts, it comes to around $50,000, I explained with precise detail. Jeffrey froze like a statue, his brain seemingly unable to process the information. Are you listening? I asked, enjoying his reaction like a cat with a mouse. This is madness. How could you do this without consulting me? Jeffrey muttered in disbelief. Because you wouldn't answer your phone. I snapped back. That's when Uncle Steven stepped in, his voice sharp as a blade. You have the audacity to complain about management? You who has a secret child with your mistress and missed your own parents' funeral. Jeffrey was speechless, trying to change the subject, but Aunt Diane wasn't finished. That's not all, we have another little surprise for you. Surprise? What else could there be? He asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. Well, your father's friends suggested holding a memorial concert for his fans. As you know, he was deeply loved, and many fans were devastated by his death. We thought the best tribute would be to celebrate with his greatest hits, Melissa explained. His friends were very enthusiastic about honoring him with a jazz session. How could we refuse such an offer? She concluded. You really did this? You should have waited until I returned to plan any memorial, Jeffrey complained. A memorial can be held anytime, Jeffrey said, still in disbelief. The problem was, the musicians were on tour and last week was their only available time, someone explained calmly. Jeffrey shook his head in disbelief, muttering, this is madness, completely inappropriate. But the real story was slightly different. My original conversation with Gary, my father-in-law's best friend, went like this. We're thinking of holding a memorial concert for Raymond's fans. I think he and his fans would really appreciate it. That's a wonderful idea. Knowing his personality, he would have loved it, I replied. We'll handle all the arrangements and costs, your family won't have to worry about anything, Gary generously offered. Just a moment, I interrupted him with calculated precision. Jeffrey, as their son, will cover the costs. Could we possibly hold the party next weekend? Next weekend? Yes, that would work fine. Thank you, Gary replied, surprised but accommodating. After this conversation, the event was announced on my father-in-law's website, musicians were invited, and everything fell into place like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of revenge. How much did this party cost? Jeffrey demanded, his voice tight with irritation, completely missing the emotional significance of the event. Jeffrey, I've said this before, you were gallivanting with your mistress while we buried your parents. You're in no position to take that tone with Monica, Diane said. I don't care about the party details, just tell me how much it cost, Jeffrey snapped, trying to dismiss her reprimand. Well, if you only want to discuss money, I sighed with theatrical weariness. Despite the short notice, nearly 1,000 people attended. We provided food and drinks for everyone, and your father's musician friends performed his greatest hits. It was a beautiful tribute filled with nostalgia and respect. Some guests laid flowers before your parents' photos, others simply enjoyed the music, each mourning in their own way. As announced on the website, we requested no monetary gifts or flowers. Despite the pressure, I'm proud we managed to organize such a magnificent funeral, book the venue, and handle every detail in such a short time. The total was substantial, but worth every penny. Your father's musician friends refused payment, even for their equipment. However, the venue rental, food, and drinks came to $50,000. And the contract is in your name. Is that including tax? Jeffrey asked, still failing to grasp the magnitude of the situation. By this point, Jeffrey seemed numb to everything except the tax implications, which made not only me but his entire family struggle to contain their laughter. So that brings the total to about $100,000. I don't have that kind of money. With the divorce too, I'm finished, Jeffrey mumbled, looking increasingly devastated. Divorce? Of course we're divorcing. Don't expect any sympathy from me, I replied icily. I figured as much, Jeffrey sighed, completely defeated. At that moment, his aunt added one more twist to the knife, causing Jeffrey to perk up slightly. But it's not over yet. You know there's still the inheritance to consider. The inheritance? Maybe I can use that to cover these costs, Jeffrey grasped at this last thread of hope. What he didn't know was that the inheritance alone wouldn't be enough to solve all his problems. After that, we formally divorced. Before Jeffrey returned, I had already spoken with lawyers, so the property division and child support were settled within weeks. When I thought about the future, I felt a twinge of melancholy about starting a new life alone with my son. However, shortly after the divorce was finalized, I received a desperate call from Jeffrey. Monica, please, help me, he begged in a voice I'd never heard before. What's wrong, Jeffrey? Why are you so distraught? I asked, though I knew something serious was brewing. I don't have enough money for the burial. It costs $5,000 to $6,000 to bury them separately. Please, just this once, lend me some money, Jeffrey pleaded. How can you be out of money? Didn't you receive a $100,000 inheritance? I asked, bewildered by his lack of financial planning. The property division was complete, and I hadn't even received any child support yet. That money went to the funeral services and banquet hall rental. Aunt Diane insisted we couldn't skimp on expenses because my parents had a reputation to maintain, so I paid for everything, Jeffrey explained irritably. That sounds like something Diane would say, I replied indifferently. Were those costs before or after taxes? I asked, more out of curiosity than actual interest. It's including tax. But that's not important now. The problem is, when I went to withdraw my parents' inheritance from the bank, the account was frozen. Oh yes, I remember now. After discovering your affair, I requested all of the accounts be frozen. I'd completely forgotten about that, I mused to myself. Yes, I had the accounts frozen, I confirmed without a hint of remorse. The inheritance procedures take over a month, so you won't be able to withdraw anything until then, I added with clinical precision. But that won't be in time for the burial. Jeffrey protested desperately. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Why don't you ask Natalie for help? I suggested with arctic coldness. You won't lend me the money? Jeffrey asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Of course not. We have no connection anymore. While I was very fond of your parents, you mean nothing to me now. If I saw you in the supermarket, I wouldn't even say hello. So no, I won't lend you anything, I stated with finality. That's cruel. Jeffrey shouted, but I merely replied, whatever, as he hung up in visible frustration. I thought everything was over, but a few days later, Jeffrey called repeatedly. Monica, why is my parents' inheritance only $100,000? My father was a famous musician, and my mother was a former flight attendant. It doesn't make sense, you must have withdrawn money before freezing the accounts, he accused. Don't be ridiculous. Even if I had, it would show up in the inheritance proceedings. I'm not a thief, I replied, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Then why is it so little? Jeffrey persisted. Didn't you know your parents were sending $30,000 annually for William's education? I asked. I had no idea, Jeffrey replied, shocked. I thought you knew. Your parents kept it a secret, I explained. 10 years ago, when William was born, my in-laws had surprised me with their words, Monica, thank you for giving us such a wonderful grandson. We never thought Jeffrey would have children, being so irresponsible. There's something we've wanted to discuss, they had said. What is it? I had asked, intrigued. Jeffrey has always been careless with money. As a child, he'd spend his allowance the same day he got it. That hasn't changed in adulthood, he spends his entire salary and comes asking for loans, his mother explained. Really? I thought, stunned. And I married such a man. I questioned myself. So, if Jeffrey ever married and had children, we plan to use our savings to support our grandchild, she continued. Monica, you're a wonderful person. You're thoughtful and get along with everyone. And you're very responsible. That's why we trust only you with our wishes, they said gratefully. I'm not sure I understand, I replied, confused. We want to use all our assets for William's education. We won't give anything to Jeffrey. If he inherited it, he'd waste it on foolish things, like a boat, his mother explained seriously. A boat? This is getting more frightening, I thought to myself. We don't hate him. We just know him too well. Giving him money would only ruin his life. That's why we're entrusting it to you, they concluded. Thank you. But what will Jeffrey say? I asked, slightly worried. You must never tell him. If he found out, he'd throw a tantrum like a child, they warned me. And so, his parents began depositing $30,000 into William's account every birthday. 10 years at $30,000 per year. How much is in the account now? Jeffrey demanded. Well, after taxes, there's a little over $250,000 remaining, I replied calmly. What? Jeffrey exclaimed, unable to comprehend. That's my inheritance. That money is mine. Jeffrey shouted in rage. No, your parents decided not to leave you anything. They thought you were too irresponsible with money and wanted everything to go toward William's education, I explained calmly. I don't believe it. My father would never say that. You must be stealing from me, he accused in obvious desperation. If you don't believe me, ask the bank to send you the account statements, I suggested, knowing his suspicions were groundless. Wait, but even adding up everything in the bank, it doesn't reach $400,000. That's strange, Jeffrey said, confusion evident in his voice. You really have no idea what happened, do you? Your parents donated $300,000 to charity and spent another $300,000 enjoying their lives. This $100,000 is all that's left, I explained with calculated precision. Jeffrey looked utterly stunned. His parents had always been strategic planners, and his father, especially as a musician, had lived life with style and rebellious spirit. I won't live long enough to spend millions, so let's share the wealth and spread happiness. That was their philosophy for distributing their estate. Honestly, Jeffrey was never the brightest. While he inherited this trait from his father, the elder man had charm and his own unique style. Jeffrey was just a fool. So there's no inheritance for me at all, he asked, dazed. That's right. And with all these mounting expenses, you'll probably end up in debt, I advised without a trace of sympathy. This is ridiculous, he protested. The price of infidelity is steep, isn't it? I replied with a sardonic smile. What does that have to do with the inheritance? He demanded, barely containing his anger. Nothing at all, I answered, savoring this moment of revenge against my unfaithful, ignorant, treacherous ex-husband. But something still nagged at my conscience, my sister. Taking a bold step, I decided to contact Natalie's ex-husband. Hey, Kevin. It's been a while, I said when he answered. Monica? I'm surprised. Why are you calling? He asked curiously. I've been thinking about why you and Natalie divorced, I began carefully. It was her infidelity. She was involved with multiple men, and we weren't even sure who our daughter's father was, Kevin confessed sadly. There were others besides Jeffrey? I asked, shocked. Yes. I wanted a DNA test, but she refused. I miss my daughter, but I don't even know if she's really mine. I wanted to raise her, but Natalie wouldn't allow it, he explained, his voice heavy with sadness. I understand, I replied sympathetically, choosing not to mention Jeffrey's possible paternity to spare Kevin further pain. This new information demanded action, but I needed to proceed carefully. With this goal in mind, I called Jeffrey again. Hello, Jeffrey, I said when he answered. What now? Missing me already? Want to come back? Can't blame you, he replied sarcastically. I've learned something interesting, want to hear it? I kept my voice steady. What joke is it this time? He asked irritably. Natalie's daughter might not be yours after all, I revealed. You called just to tell me that? I already know she could be mine or Kevin's. That's all there is to it, he dismissed. It's not that simple. Kevin told me there were other men involved. So actually, neither you nor he might be the father, I explained. Are you saying I've been living a lie? He asked incredulously. That's exactly what I'm saying. And with those words, I felt my revenge against my sister was complete. This secret was enough to destroy what remained of Natalie and Jeffrey's relationship. As expected, rumors about Natalie spread through the company like wildfire, forcing her to resign. Jeffrey's reputation at work plummeted, making him a target of cold stares and whispered gossip. 5 years have passed since then. Our son William is almost 16 now. Thanks to his grandparents' financial foresight, he attends a prestigious private school. As for me, I've remarried and enjoy a peaceful, happy life. Jeffrey hasn't changed. He pays child support and living expenses, but still spends his entire paycheck the day he gets it. Those fancy dinners he used to brag about turned out to be instant noodles with KFC on the side. Still, he and his son seem to enjoy their modest meals together. Natalie hasn't changed either. She's still searching for men to depend on for financial support. I've cut all contact with her and have no intention of reconnecting. Our parents worry about the estrangement between us sisters, but I remain silent. Every year, I visit my parents-in-law's graves. Knowing their sense of humor, I think they're probably laughing at how all this turned out. Now, I want to share my thoughts about these events, my experiences, and the broader perspective I've gained. It took time to process everything, understand the details, and learn from this experience. So now, I'm opening my heart to share my deepest thoughts with you. First, thank you for reading my story. Life has its ups and downs, and sometimes we feel caught in an endless storm. I experienced difficult times and faced challenges I never expected. From the beginning, there were signs that things wouldn't be easy. Have you ever been in a relationship where, despite your best efforts, the differences were just too great to overcome? How did you handle it? In my case, my relationship with Jeffrey was a constant source of conflict. Every decision, every small disagreement, piled up until they became an insurmountable mountain. I remember the days spent juggling household finances, meeting family demands, trying to control everything. Arguments about money, managing funeral costs, and memorial service funds were a constant source of stress. How do you manage family tensions? Do you have any advice for dealing with situations where money becomes a battlefield? And about my former sister Natalie. Have you ever had a relationship with someone who refuses to change regardless of circumstances? Natalie seems trapped in an endless cycle of dependency and disappointment. If you've had similar experiences, how did you cope? How do you accept seeing someone you once knew well staying exactly the same? Discussions about childcare, money, and the future with Natalie were incredibly difficult. When I learned that my in-laws had set aside money for William's education instead of Jeffrey, I felt confused and somewhat guilty about betraying Jeffrey. How do you accept and deal with family decisions you don't understand? Through it all, I've realized that our forgiveness is a powerful tool. This includes not only forgiving others but also forgiving yourself. Have you ever had to forgive someone, or yourself, to move forward? How did you accomplish that? Through these experiences and decisions, I've learned that life goes on no matter what happened in the past. My son William is growing up and has been blessed with opportunities that make me proud. Watching him grow brings peace to my heart. Have you had moments in your life where a new generation gave you hope and made everything feel worthwhile? Finally, thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes, sharing our experiences is a way to connect with others and find comfort in our shared struggles. I'd like to know about you too. Your life and how you've faced challenges. Please share what you've learned from your experiences and any advice for those going through difficult times. I'm here to listen, share, and learn together. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this conversation. I hope we can continue this journey called life, supporting each other along the way. Until next time.